Everyone, hello, good morning, hi, good morning, I'm back, and I'm feeling a lot better. For those of you who, hi, I see, good morning, hold on, let me just, there we go, get myself comfy, cozy. Hi, I see you there, good morning. Sorry for yesterday, guys. I was feeling very, very sick. I had gotten pretty bad food poisoning. Still feeling a little icky, but I'm a lot better than I was yesterday. Yesterday was purging from both ends, if you know what I mean. So, today I feel a lot better. Real quick, I want to just do a little morning chat with y'all. It's gross weather. Today's weather is disgusting. It's gross. It's rainy. It's miserable. I'm feeling better, but the weather outside is absolutely horrendous. How are you today? I am doing very well, Sarah. I forgot to pop out my chat. Hold on. That way I can see you guys. I'm doing well, Sarah. I'm feeling better. Not 100%. I still feel rather icky, but I am doing much better than I was yesterday. Yesterday I was purging from every orifice of my body, and it was absolutely horrendous. I feel much better today. I even managed to take a shower and eat something. I made myself some rice porridge to last me for at least a day or two. So that way I have something to eat, something in my system that won't cause my stomach to rebel too badly. So, but I'm doing better. I'm feeling better. Just taking it easy today. I'm just taking it easy. It's a gloomy, rainy, disgusting day. It's raining outside. It's gloomy. But it's great. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling a lot better, which matters the most to me. So, weather be damned. I don't know how I got food poisoning. I had a really good weekend, and I don't think I ate anything that really made my stomach, that really would have constituted for food poisoning. I'm still kind of icky today, too. Like, trying to eat this morning was kind of a nightmare. But, I managed to do it, and I haven't purged yet, so. Really quickly, how are your guys' weekend? We're definitely going into the story time today, because it's 2 weeks overdue. But I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. I hope you guys, enjoyed it. I hope it was relaxing. I hope it was fun. Yeah, no, Cal, I absolutely was. Every time I went to go vomit, I had to, yeah, no. I was the goat from Futurama. I was the purge goat. It was foul. It was really, really bad. It was really, really bad. Thankfully, I'm much better now. I got plenty of rest. Stomach's still a little soft and gooey, but, I'm gonna take it easy with what I eat for the next few days. Make sure there's nothing too hard on my stomach. Like I said, I'm gonna eat porridges and oatmeals, and it's generally easy and benign food for a while, just so my stomach can kind of readjust. But yes, I'm doing better. My friends over the weekend, they're lovely people. I love my friends so much. They threw me a surprise birthday party over our weekend, and I was very surprised. I wasn't expecting it. You know, I came to hang out. I thought, oh, okay, it's just gonna be a normal hangout, no big deal. But then they threw me a surprise party, and for those of you who don't know, I'm not big on surprises. They caused me a lot of anxiety. So my friends, they set up a whole birthday party, got me my favorite cake. You can't even find my favorite cake anymore, which is so sad. Like, a lot of places don't make them unless you special order them. They special ordered this one specifically, and I was so happy. It's a Black Forest cake, by the way. Black Forest cakes are chocolate cakes with cherries in it. Oh, delicious. I can't find them anymore in my area, which is so sad. You have to, like, special order them because nobody makes them anymore. It's so sad. So my friends, they ended up getting a very special ordered cake from my favorite bakery, and they made me cry. They got me cool gifts. They made me cry. They're very awesome. I had a great weekend. I spent the weekend just on that high of birthday and best friends, and I love my friends. I think they're they're like my second family. I love them so much. I'm gonna cry all over again because it was such a great surprise. Oh, and that cake was slamming. The best Black Forest cake I've ever had in my life. I only get to eat that cake once a year, and it was the best cake ever. But I got really neat gifts from a lot of amazing friends, and I'm so happy. It was a very good birthday. A very good birthday week for me. I got a new pop figure from a game, one of my favorite games, Sally Face. Definitely gotta play Sally Face on stream at some point. Probably when I still move to Discord. I mean, not Discord. When I move to Twitch, I will end up, I'll probably end up playing Sally Face on Twitch. I'll end up buying the game and playing it. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Knitting cradles of fecal matter. Listen, Cal. It was bad, okay? Puking from both ends is the only way I can actually say how I was dealing. Okay, it was bad. It was bad. Those who have had stomach viruses or food poisoning would know how bad it gets. So, yesterday was just a day of I'm not okay. Because I was gonna power through it. Because I was like, oh, okay, I'll purge for now, then do my stream, and then afterwards just take a nap. Nope, I couldn't even do that. I couldn't stop purging, unfortunately. It was really bad. I was like, oh no, I wanted to talk to all of you. I wanted to make sure you guys were all doing okay. But I'm not doing it. And I had a whole plan I was like, okay, I'm mad at myself because I had a whole plan. Because I had bought, like, on my birthday, I had bought a whole bag of candy from this big, and like when I say big, I mean like 2-3 story tall candy store. And I bought a bunch, I didn't buy a lot of candy, but I bought a good amount of candy, and I was like, I'm gonna taste test these. Because these are candies I haven't had in a very long time, and I would have loved to have them. I haven't even eaten any of them yet, except for maybe the Jawbreakers. I got Jawbreakers. I ended up eating a couple of Jawbreakers because I love Jawbreakers. But otherwise, I haven't touched any of the candy that I bought. Because I really, really wanted to do on a stream. I was trying to finagle a way to do like a hand cam thing with my phone and the computer, and it didn't work out too great. There was a lot of lag. a lot of disconnection issues. I was gonna do it anyway, but Anyway, enough about me. We'll save the chat. We'll save the chatting for tomorrow. I'll probably end up doing a chatting stream tomorrow just to make up for Monday. So that'll be that. But yes, I had a great birthday. I'm gonna be so funny enough. One of my dearest and bestest friends is also having a birthday. We're born a week apart. My birthday was before his, so I'm gonna be making a cake this week. Hopefully he's not here to see this, but considering how late in the day he wakes up, I highly doubt it. I'm gonna make him a nice lemon bundt cake. Oh, he's gonna love it. A nice little lemon bundt cake with the with a nice lemon icing. Mm-hmm. That's gonna be a cake for him for his birthday. It's gonna be a surprise, but don't tell nobody. It's gonna be a surprise. Shh. Don't tell nobody. He comes into this chat often, so don't say nothing, you guys. Don't say nothing. It'll be a nice special little surprise. I'm excited too because I haven't baked a bundt cake. I haven't baked a lemon bundt cake in a while, and I have a great recipe for it, so I'm excited. Alright, so we're gonna continue today. Enough of my babbling. We're gonna continue today with Through the Looking Glass and what Alice found there, the sequel to Alice in Wonderland. Last time we left off, Alice went through the looking glass. She met the queen, the white queen. Oh, was it the red queen or the white queen? She's basically going across a giant chess set, and she meets the looking glass insects. She meets a bunch of weird individuals. And now she gets to meet Tweedledee and Tweedledum, so we're going to get into it. I hope you guys are ready and enjoy. Chapter 4, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They were standing under a tree, each with an arm around the other's neck, and Alice knew which was which in a moment, because one of them had Dum embroidered on his collar, and the other Dee. I suppose they've each got Tweedle around the back of the collar, she said to herself. They stood so still that she quite forgot that they were alive, and she was just looking around if the word Tweedle was written at the back of each collar, when she was startled by a voice coming from the one marked Dum. "If you think we're waxworks," he said, you ought to pay, you know. Waxworks weren't meant to be looked at for nothing. No how." "Contrariwise," added the one marked D, "if you think we're alive, you ought to speak." "I'm sure I'm very sorry," was all Alice could say. For the words of the old song kept ringing through her head like the ticking of a clock. She could hardly help saying them out loud. Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed to have a battle, for Tweedledum said Tweedledee had spoiled his nice new rattle. Just then flew down a monstrous crow, as black as a tar barrel, which frightened both the heroes so they quite forgot about their quarrel. "I know what you're thinking about," said Tweedledum, "but it isn't so, nohow." "Contrariwise," continued Tweedledee, "if it were so, it might be, and if it were so, it would be, but as it isn't, it ain't. That's logic." Fucking love this book. I do too, gal. I do too. "I was thinking," said Alice very politely, "which is the best way out of this wood? It's getting so dark. Would you tell me, please?" But the fat little men only looked at each other and grinned. They looked so exactly like a couple of great schoolboys that Alice couldn't help pointing her finger at Tweedledum and saying, "First boy." "Nohow," Tweedledum cried out briskly and shut his mouth up again with a snap. "Next boy," said Alice, passing on to Tweedledee, though she felt quite certain he would only shout out "contrariwise," and so he did. "You've begun wrong," cried Tweedledum. "The first thing in a visit is to say, 'How do you do?' and shake hands." And here the two brothers gave each other a hug, and then they held out two hands that were free to shake hands with her. Alice did not like shaking hands with either of them first, for fear of hurting the other one's feelings, so as best way out of the difficulty, she took hold of both hands at once. Next moment, they were dancing around in a ring. It seemed quite natural, she remembered afterwards, and that she was not even surprised to hear music playing. It seemed to come from the tree under which they were dancing, and it was done, as well as she could make it out, by the branches running across one another, like fiddles and fiddlesticks. Oh, excuse me 1 second. Looks like one of my cats wants to go out. Hold on a second. You wanna go? Go out. Okay. There you go. Watch, in a few minutes the cat's gonna want to come back in. The cat's gonna want to come back in, watch. I want to go out. No, I want to go in. I want to go out. I want to go in. Cats. My boy Elon really said X. Right, I refuse to call it X. I'm going to forever call it Twitter. It's Twitter to me. I don't care. X my butt. It's Twitter. Alright, let's go. But it certainly was funny, Alice said afterwards, when she was telling her sister the history of all this, to find myself singing "Here We Go Round the Mulberry Bush." I don't know when I began it, but somehow I felt as if I'd been singing it a long, long time. The other two dancers were fat and very soon out of breath. 4 times round is enough for one dance, Tweedledum panted out, and they left off dancing as suddenly as they had begun, and the music stopped at the same moment. Then they let go of Alice's hands and stood looking at her for a minute. There was a rather awkward pause, as Alice didn't know how to begin a conversation with people she had just been dancing with. It would never do to say, "How do you do now?" she said to herself. We seem to have gotten beyond that somehow. "I hope you're not much tired," she said at last. "Nohow." "And thank you very much for asking," said Tweedledum. "So much obliged," added Tweedledee. "You like poetry?" "Yes, pretty, well, some poetry," Alice said doubtfully. "Would you tell me which road leads out of the wood?" Hi, Kakarot, hello, hello. And I replied with X social media, also, hi, how are y'all doing? I'm doing much better. I had food poisoning yesterday, which is why I didn't stream. I feel better. My stomach's still a little iffy, but I'm feeling a lot better than I was. How are you doing, Kakarot? I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you had a really good weekend. I hope you had a great weekend. Alright, back to the story. What shall I repeat to her, said Tweedledee, looking around at Tweedledum with great solemn eyes and not noticing Alice's question. The walrus and the carpenter is the longest, Tweedledum replied, giving his brother an affectionate hug. Tweedledee began instantly. The sun was shining. Here Alice ventured to interrupt him. If it's very long, she said as politely as she could, would you please tell me for which road? Tweedledee smiled gently and began again. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she had thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. The sea was wet as wet could be. The sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No bird was flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. The walrus and the carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If this were only cleared away, they said, it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year, do you suppose, the walrus said, that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. O oysters, come and walk with us, the walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk, along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4, to give a hand to each. The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd, because, you know, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4, and thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The walrus and the carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock conveniently low, and all the little oysters stood, all waiting in a row. The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings. Hi, Claria. Hi. Welcome. It's good to see you again, Claria. I hope you're doing well, friend. Well, that's good. I was having a lot of fun watching anime. Nice, Kakara. And why the sea was boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. But wait a bit, the oysters cried, before we have our chat. For some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat. No hurry, said the carpenter. They thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides are very good indeed. Now if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed. But not on us, the oysters cried, turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do. The night is fine, the walrus said. Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are so very nice. The carpenter said nothing but, cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice. It seems a shame, the walrus said, to play them such a trick, after we've brought them out so far and made them trot so quick. The carpenter said nothing but, the butter spread too thick. I weep for you, the walrus said. I deeply sympathize. With sobs and tears he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. The oysters, said the carpenter, you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again? But answers, they came none. And this was scarcely odd because they'd eaten every one. I like the walrus the best, said Alice, because you see he was a little sorry for the poor oysters. He ate more than the carpenter, though, said Tweedledee. You see, he held his handkerchief in front, so that the carpenter couldn't count how many he took, contrariwise. That was mean, said Alice indignantly. And I like the carpenter the best, if he didn't eat so many as the walrus. But he ate as many as he could, said Tweedledum. This is a puzzler. After a pause, Alice began, well, they were both very unpleasant characters. Here she checked herself in some alarm at hearing something that sounded to her like the puffing of a large steam engine in the wood near them, though she feared it was most likely to be a wild beast. Are there any lions or tigers about here? She asked timidly. It's only the Red King snoring, said Tweedledee. Come, look at him, the brothers cried, and they each took up one of Alice's hands and led her up to where the king was sleeping. Isn't he a lovely sight? Said Tweedledum. Alice couldn't say honestly that he was. He had a tall red nightcap on, with a tassel, and he was lying crumpled up into a sort of untidy heap, and snoring loud. Fit to snore his head off, as Tweedledum remarked. I'm afraid he'll catch a cold with lying on the damp grass, said Alice, who was a very thoughtful little girl. He's dreaming now, said Tweedledee. And what do you think he's dreaming about? Alice said, nobody can guess that. What about you? Why, about you, Tweedledee exclaimed, clapping his hands triumphantly. And if he lets off dreaming about you, where do you suppose you'd be? Where I am now, of course, Alice said. Not you, Tweedledee retorted contemptuously. You'd be nowhere. Why, you're only a sort of thing in his dream. If that there king was to wake, added Tweedledum, you'd go out, bang, just like a candle. I shouldn't, Alice exclaimed indignantly. Besides, if I'm only a sort of thing in his dream, what are you, should I like to know? Ditto, said Tweedledum. Ditto, ditto, said Tweedledee. Wasabi! Hi, Wasabi! How are you doing, friend? How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling better. Not 100%, but I'm definitely a lot better than I was yesterday. I had the food poisonings, or stomach bug, or something. Something that was making me purge all day yesterday. But I feel a lot better. I feel a lot better. I feel a lot better. How are you doing, Wasabi? I hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great weekend, friend. He shouted this so loud that Alice couldn't help saying, Hush, you'll wake him, I'm afraid, if you make so much noise. Kay didn't die? I did not die. I was very sicky, but I did not die. I'm alright. I'm fine. I'm always fine. No matter what I go through, I'm always okay. I'm always okay. Yeah. Alright. Back at it. Excuse me. Let me have some water real quick. Yes. He shouted this so loud that Alice couldn't help saying, Hush, you'll wake him, I'm afraid, if you make so much noise. I'm gonna just got off a cheeky 3-hour session. I'm not for the 2 with them. I'm sorry I couldn't get to play with you yesterday with Sabi. I just felt really sicky. I felt really, really sicky. We gotta play again though soon. We gotta play again soon though. I'm totally down for a session later if you feel up to it. If you feel up to it. Kakra, you just downloaded it yesterday too? Nice. It's a fun game. Left 4 Dead 2 is like a fun game to play with friends. Cause you just kill zombies and shit talk. That's really how I like to play the game. Just kill zombies and shit talk. Then again, that's how I like to play any kind of like group game where it involves copious amounts of mindless violence. Yay. Yay. Oh, phrasing there, Kakarot. Phrasing. Anyway. Okay, I chose chaos today. Let's go. Let's go back to the story. Yes. Okay. I'm going back to the story. Excuse me. Well, it's no use you're talking about waking him, said Tweedledum. When you're the only one of the things when you're only one of the things in his dream. You know very well you're not real. I am real, said Alice, beginning to cry. You won't make yourself a bit realer by crying, Tweedledee remarked. There's nothing to cry about. If I wasn't real, said Alice, half laughing through her tears, it seemed all so ridiculous. I shouldn't be able to cry. I hope you don't suppose those are real tears, Tweedledee erupted in a tone of great contempt. I know they're talking nonsense, Alice thought to herself, and it's foolish to cry about it. So she brushed away her tears and went on as cheerfully as she could. At any rate, I'd better be getting out of the wood, for it's really coming on very dark. Do you think it's going to rain? What? Sorry, I was looking at the chat. Tweedledum spread a large umbrella over himself and his brother and looked up into it. No, I don't think it is, he said. At least not under here, nohow. But it may rain outside. But it may rain outside. It may if it chooses, said Tweedledee. You've no objection, contrariwise. Selfish things, thought Alice, and she was just going to say goodnight and leave them when Tweedledum sprang out from under the umbrella and seized her by the wrist. Do you see that? He said in a voice choking with passion, and his eyes grew large and yellow all in one moment, as he pointed with a trembling finger at a small white thing lying under the tree. It's only a rattle, said Alice, after a careful examination of the little white thing. Not a rattlesnake, you know, she added hastily, thinking that he was frightened. Only an old rattle, quite old and broken. I knew it was, cried Tweedledum, beginning to stamp about wildly and tear his hair. It's spoilt, of course. Here he looked at Tweedledee, who immediately sat down on the ground and tried to hide himself under the umbrella. Alice laid her hand upon his arm and said in a soothing tone, You needn't be so angry about an old rattle. But it isn't old, cried Tweedledum, in a greater fury than ever. It's new, I tell you. I bought it yesterday. My nice new rattle. And his voice rose to a perfect scream. All this time, Tweedledee was trying his best to fold up the umbrella with himself in it, which was such an extraordinary thing to do that it quite took off Alice's attention from the angry brother. But he couldn't quite succeed, and it ended in his rolling over, bundled up in the umbrella with only his head out, and there he lay, opening and shutting his mouth and his large eyes, looking more and more like a fish than anything else, thought Alice. Of course you agree to have a battle, Tweedledum said in a calmer tone. I suppose so, the other sulkily replied, as he crawled out of the umbrella. Only she must help us to dress up, you know. So the two brothers went off hand in hand into the wood and returned a minute with their arms full of things, such as bolsters, blankets, hearth rugs, tablecloths, dish covers, and coal scuttles. I hope you're a good hand in pinning and tying strings, Tweedledum remarked. Every one of these things has to go on, somehow or other. Alice said afterward that she had never seen such a fuss made about anything in all her life. The way these two bustled about, and the quantity of things they put on, and the trouble they gave her in tying strings and fastening buttons. Really, they'll be more like bundles of old clothes than anything else by the time they're ready, she said to herself as she arranged a bolster around the neck of Tweedledee to keep his head from being cut off, as he said. You know, he added very gravely, it's one of the most serious things that can possibly happen to one in a battle, to get one's head cut off. Alice laughed aloud, but she managed to turn it into a cough for fear of hurting his feelings. Do I look very pale? Said Tweedledum, coming up to have his helmet tied on. He called it a helmet, though it would certainly look more like a saucepan. Well, yes, a little, Alice replied gently. I'm very brave generally, he went on in a low voice. Only today I happen to have a headache. And I've got a toothache, said Tweedledee, who had overheard the remark. I'm far worse than you. Then you'd better not fight today, said Alice, thinking it a good opportunity to make peace. We must have a bit of a fight, but I don't care about going on long, said Tweedledum. What's the time now? Tweedledee looked at his watch and said, 4:30. Let's fight till 6 and then have dinner, said Tweedledum. Very well, the other said rather sadly. And she can watch us. Only you'd better not come very close, he added. I generally hit everything I can see when I get really excited. And I hit everything within reach, cried Tweedledum, whether I can see it or not. Alice laughed. You must hit the trees pretty often, I should think, she said. Tweedledum looked round with a satisfied smile. I don't suppose, he said, there'll be a tree left standing for every so far round by the time we finish. And all about a rattle, said Alice, still hoping to make them a little ashamed of fighting for such a trifle. I shouldn't have minded it so much, said Tweedledum, if it hadn't been a new one. I wish the monstrous crow would come, thought Alice. There's only one sword, you know, Tweedledum said to his brother, but you can have the umbrella. It's quite as sharp. Although we must begin quick. It's getting dark as it can. And darker, said Tweedledee. It was getting dark so suddenly that Alice thought there must be a thunderstorm coming on. What a thick black cloud that is, she said, and how fast it comes. Why, I do believe it's got wings. It's the crow, Tweedledee cried out in a shrill voice of alarm, and the two brothers took to their heels and were out of sight in a moment. Alice ran a little way into the wood and stopped under a large tree. You can never get me here, thought Alice. It's far too large to squeeze itself among the trees. But I wish it wouldn't flap its wings so. It makes quite a hurricane in the wood. Here's somebody's shawl being blown away. Chapter 5. Wool and Water. She caught the shawl as she spoke, and looked about for the owner. In another moment the White Queen came running wildly through the wood, with both arms stretched out wide, as if she were flying, and Alice very civilly went to meet her with the shawl. I'm very glad I happened to be in the way, Alice said as she helped her put on the shawl again. The White Queen only looked at her in a helpless, frightened sort of way, and kept repeating something in a whisper to herself. That sounded like bread and butter, and Alice felt that if there was to be any conversation at all, she must manage it herself. So she began rather timidly. Am I addressing the White Queen? Well, yes, if you call that addressing, the Queen said. It isn't my notion of a thing at all. Alice thought it would never do to have an argument at the very beginning of their conversation, so she smiled and said, If your Majesty will only tell me the right way to begin, I'll do it as well as I can. But I don't want it done at all, groaned the poor Queen. I've been addressing myself for the last 2 hours. It would have been all the better, as it seemed to Alice, if she had gotten someone else to dress her. She was so dreadfully untidy. Every single thing is crooked, thought Alice to herself, and she's all over pins. May I put your shawl straight for you? She added out loud. I don't know what's the matter with it, the Queen said in a melancholy voice. It's out of temper, I think. I've pinned it here and I've pinned it there, but it's no pleasing it. It can't go straight, you know, if you pin it all in one side, Alice said, as she gently put it right for her. And dear me, what a state your hair is in. The brush has gotten tangled in it, said the Queen with a sigh, and I lost the comb yesterday. Alice carefully released the brush and did her best to get the hair into order. Come, you look rather better now, she said, after altering most of the pins, but really you should have a lady's maid. I'm sure I'll take you with pleasure. The Queen said. 2 pence a week, and jam every other day. Alice couldn't help laughing, as she said, I don't want you to hire me, and I don't care for jam. It is very good jam, said the Queen. Well, I don't want it today, at any rate. You couldn't have it if you did want it, the Queen said. The rule is, jam tomorrow and jam yesterday, but never jam today. It must come sometimes to jam today, Alice objected. No, it can't, said the Queen. It's jam every other day. Today isn't any other day, you know. I don't understand you, said Alice. It's dreadfully confusing. That's the effect of living backwards, the Queen said kindly. It always makes one a little giddy at first. Living backwards, Alice repeated in great astonishment. I've never heard of such a thing. But there's one great advantage in it. That one's memories works both ways. I'm sure mine only works one way, Alice remarked. I can't remember things before they happen. It's a poor sort of memory that only works backwards, the Queen remarked. What sort of things do you remember best? Alice ventured to ask. Oh, things that happened the week after next, the Queen replied in a careless tone. For instance, now, she went on, sticking a large piece of plaster on her finger as she spoke. There's the King's messenger. He's in prison right now, being punished, and the trial doesn't even begin until next Wednesday. And of course the crime comes last of all. Suppose he never commits the crime, said Alice. That would be all the better, wouldn't it? The Queen said, as she bound the plaster around her finger with a little bit of ribbon. Alice felt there was no denying that. Of course it would be all the better, she said, but it wouldn't be all the better his being punished. You're wrong there, at any rate, said the Queen. Were you ever punished? Only for faults, said Alice. And you were all the better for it, I know, said the Queen triumphantly. Yes, but then I had done the things I was punished for, said Alice. That makes all the difference. But if you hadn't done them, the Queen said, that would have been all the better still. Better and better and better. Her voice went higher with each better until it got quite to a squeak at last. Alice was just beginning to say, there's a mistake somewhere, when the Queen began screaming so loud that she had to leave the sentence unfinished. Oh, oh, oh! shouted the Queen, shaking her hand about as if she wanted to shake it off. My finger is bleeding. Oh, oh, oh! Her screams were so exactly like the whistle of a steam engine that Alice had to hold both her hands over her ears. What is the matter? She said, as soon as there was a chance of making herself heard. Have you pricked your finger? I haven't pricked it yet, the Queen said, but I soon shall. Oh, oh, oh! When do you expect to do it? Asked Alice, feeling very much inclined to laugh. When I fasten my shawl again, the poor Queen groaned out. The brooch will come out undone directly. Oh, oh! As she said the words, the brooch flew open, and the Queen clutched wildly at it, and tried to clasp it again. Take care, cried Alice. You're holding it all crooked. And she caught the brooch, but it was too late. The pin had slipped, and the Queen had pricked her finger. That accounts for the bleeding, you see, she said to Alice with a smile. Now you understand the way the things happen here. But why don't you scream now? Alice asked, holding her hands ready to put over her ears again. Why, I've done all the screaming already, said the Queen. What would be the good of having it all over again? By this time it was getting light. The crow must have flown away, I think, said Alice. I'm so glad it's gone. I thought it was the night coming on. I wish I could manage to be glad, the Queen said. Only I never can remember the rule. You must be very happy, living in this wood, and being glad wherever you like. Only it is so very lonely here, said Alice in a melancholy voice, and at the thought of her loneliness 2 large tears came rolling down her cheeks. Oh, don't go on like that, cried the poor Queen, wringing her hands in despair. Consider what a great girl you are. Consider what a long way you've come today. Consider what o'clock it is. Consider anything, only don't cry. Alice could not help laughing at this, even in the midst of her tears. Can you keep from crying by considering things? She asked. That's the way it's done, the Queen said with great decision. Nobody can do 2 things at once, you know. Let's consider your age to begin with. How old are you? I'm 7.5 exactly. You needn't say exactly, the Queen remarked. I can believe it without that. Now I'll give you something to believe. I'm just 101, 5 months and a day. I can't believe that, said Alice. Can't you? The Queen said in a pitying tone. Try again. Draw a long breath and shut your eyes. Alice laughed. There's no use trying, she said. One can't believe in impossible things. I dare say you haven't had much practice, said the Queen. When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. There goes the shawl again. The brooch had come undone as she spoke, and a sudden gust of wind blew the Queen's shawl across a little brook. The Queen spread out her arms again and went flying after it, and this time she succeeded in catching it for herself. I've got it, she cried in a triumphant tone. Now you shall see me pin it on again, all by myself. Then I hope your finger is better now, Alice said very politely as she crossed the little brook after the Queen. Oh, much better, cried the Queen, her voice rising to a squeak as she went on. Much better, 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 better. The last word ended in a long bleat, so it was like a sheep that Alice quite started. She looked at the Queen, who seemed to have suddenly wrapped herself up in wool. Alice rubbed her eyes and looked again. She couldn't make out what had happened at all. Was she in a shop? Was that really a sheep that was sitting on the other side of the counter? Rub as she would, she could make nothing more of it. She was in a little dark shop, leaning with her elbows on a counter, and opposite to her was an old sheep sitting in an armchair knitting, and every now and then leaning off to look at her through a great pair of spectacles. "What is it you want to buy?" the sheep said at last, looking up for a moment from her knitting. "I don't quite know yet," said Alice very gently. "I should like to look all around me first, if I might." "You may look in front of you and on both sides if you like," said the sheep, "but you can't look all around you unless you've got eyes at the back of your head." But these, as it happened, Alice had not got, so she contented herself with turning around, looking at the shelves as she came to them. The shop seemed to be full of all manner of curious things, but the oddest part of it all was, wherever she looked hard at any shelf to make out exactly what it had on it, that particular shelf was always quite empty, though the others around it were crowded as full as they could hold. "Things flow about so here," she said at last in a plaintive tone, after she had spent a minute or so in vainly pursuing a large, bright thing that looked sometimes like a doll and sometimes like a work box, and was always on the shelf next above the one she was looking at. "And this one was the most provoking of all. But I'll tell you what," she added, as a sudden thought struck her. "I'll fold it up to the very top of the shelf. I'll fold it up to the very top shelf of all. It'll puzzle it to go through the ceiling, I expect." But even this plan failed. The thing went through the ceiling as quietly as possible, as if it were quite used to it. "Are you a child or a teetotum?" the sheep said, as she took up another pair of needles. "You'll make me quite giddy soon if you go on turning around like that." She was now working with 14 pairs at once, and Alice couldn't help but looking at her in some great astonishment. "How can she knit with so many?" the puzzled child thought to herself. "She gets more and more like a porcupine every minute." "Can you row?" the sheep asked, handing her a pair of knitting needles as she spoke. "Yes, a little, but not on land, and not with needles," Alice was beginning to say, when suddenly the needles turned into oars in her hands. She found that they were in a little boat, floating along between banks, so there was nothing for it but to do her best. "Feather!" cried the sheep, as she took up another pair of needles. That didn't sound like a remark that needed any answer, so Alice said nothing but pulled away. There was something very queer about the water, she thought, as every now and then the oars got fast in it and would hardly come out again. "Feather! Feather!" the sheep cried again, taking more needles. "You'll be catching a crab directly." "A dear little crab," thought Alice. "I should like that." "Didn't you hear me say feather?" the sheep cried angrily, taking up quite a bunch of needles. "Indeed I did," said Alice. "You said it very often and very loud. Please, where are the crabs?" "In the water, of course," said the sheep, sticking some of the needles into her hair as her hands were full. "Feather, I say." "Why do you say feather so often?" Alice said at last, rather vexed. "I'm not a bird." "You are," said the sheep. "You're a little goose." This offended Alice a little, so there was no more conversation for a minute or two, while the boat glided gently on, sometimes among the bed of weeds, which made the oars stick fast in the water worse than ever, and sometimes under the trees, but always with the same tall river banks frowning over their heads. "Oh, please, there are some scented rushes," Alice cried in a sudden transport of delight. "There really are, and such beauties." "You needn't say please to me about 'em," the sheep said, without looking up from her knitting. "I didn't put 'em there, and I'm not going to take 'em away." "No, but I meant, please may we wait and pick some?" Alice pleaded. "If you don't mind stopping the boat for a minute." "How am I to stop it?" said the sheep. "If you leave off rowing, it'll stop itself." So the boat was left to drift down the stream as it would, till it glided gently among the waving rushes. And then the little sleeves were carefully rolled up, and the little arms were plunged in elbow deep to get hold of the rushes a good long way down before breaking them off. And for a while Alice forgot all about the sheep and the knitting, as she bent over the side of the boat with just the ends of her tangled hair dipping into the water, while the bright, eager eyes she caught on one of the bunch after another of the darling scented rushes. "I only hope that the boat won't tip over," she said to herself. "Oh, what a lovely one, only I couldn't quite reach it." and it certainly did seem a little provoking. Almost as if it happened on purpose, she thought. That though she managed to pick plenty of beautiful rushes as the boat glided by, there was always a more lovely one that she couldn't reach. The prettiest are always further, she said at last with a sigh, at the obstinacy of the rushes in growing so far off, as, with flushed cheeks and dripping hair and hands, she scrambled back to her place and began arranging her newfound treasures. What mattered it to her just then that the rushes had begun to fade, and to lose all their scent and beauty, from the very moment that she picked them? Even real scented rushes, only last for a very little while. Excuse me, ow, excuse me. And these, being dream rushes, melted away almost like snow as they laid in heaps at her feet, but Alice hardly noticed this as there were so many other curious things to think about. They hadn't gone much farther before the blade of one of the oars got fast in the water, and wouldn't come out again, so Alice explained afterwards, and the consequence was that the handle of it caught her under the chin, and in spite of a series of little shrieks of "Oh, oh, oh" from poor Alice, it swept her straight off her seat and down among the heap of rushes. However, she wasn't a bit hurt, and was soon up again. The sheep went on with her knitting all the while, just as if nothing had happened. "That was a nice crab you caught," she remarked, as Alice got back into her place, very much relieved to find herself still in the boat. "Was it? I didn't see it," said Alice, peeping cautiously over the side of the boat into the dark water. "I wish it hadn't let go. I should so like a little crab to take home with me." The sheep only laughed scornfully, and went on with her knitting. "Are there many crabs here?" said Alice. "Crabs, and all sorts of things," said the sheep. "Plenty of choice. Only make up your mind. Now, what do you want to buy?" "To buy?" Alice echoed in a tone that was half astonished and half frightened, for the oars in the boat and the river had vanished, all in one moment. She was back again in the little dark shop. "I should like to buy an egg, please," she said timidly. "How do you sell them?" 5 pence farthing for one, 2 pence for two." "Then 2 are cheaper than 1, said Alice in a surprised tone, taking out her purse. "Only you must eat them both if you buy 2, said the sheep. "Then I shall have 1, please," said Alice, and she put the money on the counter, for she thought to herself, It mightn't be at all nice, The sheep took the money and put it away in the box. Then she said, "I never put things into people's hands. That would never do. You must get it for yourself." And so saying, she went off to the other end of the shop and set the egg upright on a shelf. "I wonder why it wouldn't do," thought Alice, as she groped her way among the tables and chairs, for the shop was very dark towards the end. The egg seemed to be getting further away the more I walked towards it. Let me see. Is this a chair? Why, it's got branches, I declare. How very odd to find trees growing here. And actually, here's a little brook. Well, this is the very queerest shop I've ever saw. So she went on, wandering more and more at every step, as everything turned into a tree the moment she came to it, and she quite expected the egg to do the same. Chapter 6. Humpty Dumpty. However, the egg only got larger and larger and more human. When she had come on within a few yards of it, she saw that it had eyes and a nose and a mouth. And when she had come close to it, she saw clearly that it was Humpty Dumpty himself. "It can't be anybody else," she said to herself. "I'm as certain of it as if his name were written all over his face." It might have been written 100 times easily on that enormous face. Humpty Dumpty was sitting with his legs crossed, like a Turk, on top of a high wall, such a narrow one that Alice quite wondered how he could keep his balance. And, as his eyes were steadily fixed in the opposite direction, he didn't take the least bit notice of her. She thought he must be a stuffed figure after all. "And how exactly like an egg he is," she said aloud, standing with her hands ready to catch him, for she was every moment expecting him to fall. "It's very provoking," Humpty Dumpty said after a long silence, looking away from Alice as he spoke. "To be called an egg. Very." "I said you look like an egg, sir," Alice gently explained. "Some eggs are very pretty, she added, hoping to turn her remark into a sort of compliment. "Some people," said Humpty Dumpty, looking away from her as usual, "have no more sense than a baby." Alice didn't know what to say to this. It wasn't at all like conversation, she thought, as he never said anything to her. In fact, his last remark was evidently addressed to a tree, so she stood and softly repeated to herself, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty in his place again. That last line is much too long for the poetry, she added almost aloud, forgetting that Humpty Dumpty would hear her. Don't stand chattering to yourself like that, Humpty Dumpty said, looking at her for the first time. But tell me your name and your business. My name is Alice, but it's a stupid name enough, Humpty Dumpty interrupted impatiently. What does it mean? Must a name mean something? Alice asked doubtfully. Of course it must, Humpty Dumpty said with a short laugh. My name means the shape I am, and a good handsome shape it is too. With a name like yours, you might be any shape. Almost. Why do you sit out here all alone? Said Alice, not wishing to begin an argument. Why, because there's nobody with me, cried Humpty Dumpty. Did you think I didn't know the answer to that? Ask another. Don't you think you'd be safer down on the ground? Alice went on, not wanting any idea of making another riddle, but something in her good-natured anxiety for the queer creature. That wall is so very narrow. What tremendously easy riddles you ask, Humpty Dumpty growled out. Of course I don't think so. Why, if ever I did fall off, which there's no chance of, but if I did... Here he pursed his lips, and looked so solemn and grand that Alice could hardly help laughing. If I did fall, he went on, the king has promised me. Ah, you may turn pale if you like. You didn't think I was going to say that, did you? The king has promised me, with his very own mouth, to send all his horses and all his men? Alice interrupted, rather unwisely. Now I declare that too bad, Humpty Dumpty cried, breaking into a sudden passion. You've been listening at doors and behind trees and down chimneys, or you couldn't have known it. I haven't indeed, said Alice very gently. It's in a book. Ah, well. They may write such things in a book, Humpty Dumpty said in a calmer tone. That's what you call a history of England, that is. Now, take a good look at me. I'm one that has spoken to a king. I am. Mayhap you've never seen such another. To show you I'm not proud, you may shake hands with me. He grinned almost from ear to ear as he leant forward, and nearly as possible fell off the wall in doing so, and offered Alice his hand. She watched him a little anxiously as she took it. If he smiled much more, the end of his mouth might meet behind, she thought. And then I don't know what would happen if to his head. I'm afraid it would come off. Yes, all of his horses and men, Humpty Dumpty went on. They'd pick me up again in a minute, they would. However, this conversation is going on a little too fast. Let's go back to the last remark but one. I'm afraid I can't quite remember it, Alice said very politely. In that case, we start fresh, said Humpty Dumpty. And it's my turn to choose a subject. He talked about it just as if it were a game, thought Alice. So here's a question for you. How old did you say that you were? Alice made a short calculation and said, 7 years and 6 months. Wrong, Humpty Dumpty exclaimed triumphantly. You never said a word like it. I thought you meant, how old are you, Alice? Alice explained. If I'd meant that, I'd have said it, said Humpty Dumpty. Alice didn't want to begin another argument, so she said nothing. 7 years and 6 months, Humpty Dumpty repeated thoughtfully. An uncomfortable sort of age. Now, if you would ask me my advice, I'd have said, leave me off at 7, but it's too late now. I never asked advice about growing, Alice said indignantly. Too proud? The other inquired. Alice felt even more indignant at this suggestion. I mean, she said, that one can't help growing older. One can't, perhaps, said Humpty Dumpty, but 2 can. With proper assistance, you might have left off at 7. What a beautiful belt you've got on, Alice remarked suddenly. They had had quite enough of the subject of age, she thought, and if they really were to take turns in choosing subjects, it was her turn now. At least, she corrected herself on second thoughts, a beautiful cravat, should I have said. No, a belt. I mean, beg your pardon, she added in dismay, for Humpty Dumpty looked thoroughly offended, and she began to wish she hadn't chosen that subject. If only I knew, she thought to herself, which was the neck and which was the waist. Evidently, Humpty Dumpty was very angry, though he said nothing for a minute or two. When he did speak again, it was in a deep growl. "It is a most provoking thing," he said at last, "when a person doesn't know a cravat from a belt." "I know it's very ignorant of me," said Alice, in so humble a tone that Humpty Dumpty relented. "It's a cravat, child, and a beautiful one, as you say. It's a present from the White King and Queen. There now." "Is it really?" said Alice, quite pleased to find that she had chosen a good subject after all. "They gave it to me," Humpty Dumpty continued thoughtfully, as he crossed one knee over the other and clasped his hands around it. "They gave it to me for an unbirthday present." "I beg your pardon," Alice said with a puzzled air. "I'm not offended," said Humpty Dumpty. "I mean, what is an unbirthday present?" "A present given when it isn't your birthday, of course." Alice considered a little. "I like a birthday present best," she said at last. "You don't know what you're talking about," cried Humpty Dumpty. "How many days there are in a year?" 365, said Alice. "And how many birthdays do you have?" "One. And if you take one from 365, what remains?" 364, of course." Humpty Dumpty looked doubtful. "I'd rather see that done on paper," he said. Alice couldn't help smiling as she took out her memorandum book and worked the sum for him. 365 minus 1 is 364. Humpty Dumpty took the book and looked at it carefully. "That seems to be done right," he began. "You're holding it upside down," said Alice. "To be sure I was," Humpty Dumpty said gaily as she turned it around for him. "I thought it looked a little queer. As I was saying, that seems to be done right, though I haven't time to look it over thoroughly just now. And that shows that there are 364 days where you might get an unbirthday present." "Certainly," said Alice. "And only one for birthday presents, you know. There's glory for you." I don't know what you mean by glory," Alice said. "It's her own birthday. A very happy own birthday to everyone here. Happy own birthday to everyone! Yay! Unless it's your actual birthday, then happy birthday." Humpty Dumpty smiled contemptuously. "Of course you don't, till I tell you. I meant there's a nice knockdown argument for you." "But glory doesn't mean a nice knockdown argument," Alice objected. "When I use a word," Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, "it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less." "The question is," said Alice, "whether you can make words mean so many different things." "The question is," said Humpty Dumpty, "which is to be master, that's all." Alice was too much puzzled to say anything, so after a minute Humpty Dumpty began again. "They've a temper, some of them, particularly verbs. They're the proudest. Adjectives you can do anything with, but not verbs. However, I can manage the whole lot of them. Impenetrably. That's what I say." "Would you tell me, please," said Alice, "what that means?" "Now you talk like a reasonable child," said Humpty Dumpty, looking very much pleased. "I meant by impenetrability that we had enough of that subject. It would be just as well if you mentioned what you mean to do next, as I suppose you don't mean to stop here all the rest of your life." "That's a great deal to make one word mean," said Alice in a thoughtful tone. "When I make a word do a lot of work like that," said Humpty Dumpty, "I always pay it extra." "Oh," said Alice. She was much too puzzled to make any other remark. "Ah, you should see him come round me of a Saturday night," said Humpty Dumpty, wagging his head gravely from side to side. "For to get their wages, you know." Alice didn't venture to ask what he paid them with. And so you see, I can't tell you. "You seem very clever at explaining words, sir," said Alice. "Would you kindly tell me the meaning of the poem called Jabberwocky?" "Let's hear it," said Humpty Dumpty. "I can explain all the poems that ever were invented, and a good many that haven't been invented just yet." This sounded very hopeful, so Alice repeated the first verse. "'Twas brillig and the slithy tones did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome-raves outgrabe." "That's enough to begin with," Humpty Dumpty interrupted. "There are plenty of hard words there. Brillig means 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The time when you begin broiling things for dinner. That'll do very well, said Alice. And slithy? Well, slithy means lithe and slimy. Lithe is the same as active, you see. It's a little like a portmanteau. There are two meanings packed into one word. I see it now, remarked Alice thoughtfully. And where are toves? Well, toves are something like badgers. They're something like lizards. They're something like corkscrews. They must be very curious-looking creatures. That they are, said Humpty Dumpty. Also, they make their nests under sundials. And they also live on cheese. And what is to gyre and to gimble? To gyre is to go around and round like a gyroscope. To gimble is to make holes like a gimlet. And the wave is the grass plot around a sundial, I suppose, said Alice, surprised at her own ingenuity. Of course it is. It's called wave, you know, because it goes a long way before it and a long way behind it. And a long way beyond it on each side, Alice added. Exactly so. Well then, mimsy is flimsy and miserable. There's another portmanteau for you. And a borough is a thin, shabby-looking bird with its feathers sticking out all around. Something like a live mop. And then mum raves, said Alice. I'm afraid I'm giving you a great deal of trouble. Mome raffs, excuse me. Well, a raff is sort of a green pig, but mome, I'm not certain about. I think it's short from home, meaning that they lost their way, you know? And what does outgrabe mean? Well, outgrabing is something between bellowing and whistling, with a kind of sneeze in the middle. However, you'll hear it done maybe down in the wood yonder, and when you've once heard it, you'll be quite content. Who's been repeating all that harsh stuff to you? I read it in a book, said Alice. But I had some poetry repeated to me much easier than that, by Tweedledee, I think it was. As to poetry, you know, said Humpty Dumpty, stretching out one of his great hands, I can repeat poetry as well as other folk, if it comes to that. Oh, it needn't come to that, said Alice hastily, hoping to keep him from beginning. The piece I'm going to repeat, he went on without noticing her remark, was written entirely for your amusement. Alice felt that in that case she really ought to listen to it, so she sat down and said, Thank you, rather sadly. In winter, when the fields are white, I sing this song for your delight. Only I don't sing it, he added as an explanation. I see you don't, said Alice. If you can see whether I'm singing or not, you've sharper eyes than most, Humpty Dumpty remarked severely. Alice went silent. It's spring when woods are getting green. I'll try and tell you what I mean. Thank you very much, said Alice. In summer, when the days are long, perhaps you'll understand the song. In autumn, when the leaves are brown, take pen and ink and write it down. I will, if I can remember it so long, said Alice. You needn't go on making remarks like that, Humpty Dumpty said. They're not sensible, and they put me out. I sent a message to the fish. I told them this is what I wish. The little fishes of the sea. They sent an answer back to me. The little fish's answer was, We cannot do it, sir, because... I'm afraid I don't quite understand, said Alice. It gets easier further on, Humpty Dumpty replied. I sent to them again to say, It would be better to obey. The fishes answered with a grin, Why, what a temper you are in. I told them once, I told them twice. They would not listen to advice. I took a kettle large and new, fit for the deed I had to do. Whoop, my mic fell a little bit. Hold on. There we go. My heart went hop, my heart went thump. I filled the kettle at the pump. Then someone came to me and said, The little fishes are in bed. I said to him, I said it plain, Then you must wake them up again. I said it very loud and clear. I went and shuddered in his ear. Humpty Dumpty raised his voice to almost a scream as he repeated the verse, and Alice thought with a shudder, I wouldn't have been the messenger for anything. But he was very stiff and proud. He said, You needn't shout so loud. And then he was very proud and stiff. And I said I'd go and wake them if... I took a corkscrew from the shelf and went to wake them up myself. And when I found the door was locked, I pushed and pulled and kicked and knocked. And when I found the door was shut, I tried to turn the handle, but... There was a long pause. Is that all? Alice asked timidly. That's all, said Humpty Dumpty. Goodbye. It was rather sudden, Alice thought, but after such a very strong hint that she ought to be going, she felt it would hardly be civil to stay. So she got up and held out her hand. Goodbye, till we meet again, she said as cheerfully as she could. I shouldn't know you again if we did meet, Humpty Dumpty replied in a discontented tone, giving her one of his fingers to shake. You're so exactly like other people. The face is what goes by, generally, Alice remarked in a thoughtful tone. That's just what I complain of, said Humpty Dumpty. Your face is the same as everybody has. 2 eyes, so marking their places in the air with his thumb. The nose in the middle, the mouth under. It's always the same. Now, if you had 2 eyes on the same side of the nose, for instance, or the mouth at the top, that would be some help. It wouldn't look nice, Alice objected, but Humpty Dumpty only shut his eyes and said, wait till you've tried. Alice waited a minute to see if he would speak again, but as he never opened his eyes or took any further notice of her, she said goodbye once more, and, getting no answer to this, she quietly walked away. But she couldn't help saying to herself as she went, of all the unsatisfactory, she repeated this out loud, as it was a great comfort to have such a long word to say, of all the unsatisfactory people I've ever met. She never finished that sentence, for at this moment a heavy crash shook the forest from end to end. Chapter 7, The Lion and the Unicorn. The next moment soldiers came running through the wood, at first in 2s and 3s, then 10s and 20s together, and at last in such crowds that they seemed to fill the whole forest. Alice got behind a tree for fear of being run over and watched them go by. Excuse me, I had to yawn there. Excuse me. She thought that in all her life she had never seen soldiers so uncertain on their feet. They were always tripping over something or other, and whenever one went down, several more fell over him, but the ground was soon covered with little heaps of men. Then came the horses. Having 4 feet, these managed rather better than their foot soldiers, but even they stumbled now and then, and it seemed to be a regular rule that whenever a horse stumbled, the rider fell off instantly. The confusion got worse every moment, and Alice was very glad to get out of the wood into an open place, where she found the White King seated on the ground, busily writing his memorandum book. I sent them all, the king cried in a tone of delight on seeing Alice. Did you happen to meet any soldiers, my dear, as he came through the wood? Yes, I did, said Alice. Several thousand, I should think. 4,207. That's the exact number, said the king, referring to his book. I couldn't send all the horses, you know, because 2 of them are wanted in the game. And I haven't sent the 2 messengers either. They're both gone to town. Just look along the road and tell me if you see either of them. I see nobody on the road, said Alice. I only wish I had such eyes, the king remarked in a fretful tone, to be able to see nobody. And at that distance, too. Why, it's as much as I can do to see real people by this light. All this was lost on Alice, who was still looking intently along the road, shading her eyes with one hand. I see somebody now, she exclaimed at last. And he's coming very slowly, and what curious attitudes he goes into. For the messenger kept skipping, up and down, wriggling like an eel, as he came along, with his great hands spread out like fans on each side. Not at all, said the king. He's an Anglo-Saxon messenger, and those are Anglo-Saxon attitudes. He only does them when he's happy. His name is Haya. Pronounce it so to rhyme with mayor. I love my love with an H, Alice couldn't help beginning, because he is happy. I hate him with an H because he is hideous. I fed him with ham sandwiches and hay. His name is Haya, and he lives on the hill, said the king. The king remarked simply, with the least idea that he was joining in the game, while Alice was hesitating for the name of a town beginning with H. The other messenger is called Hatta. I must have 2, you know, to come and go. One to come and one to go. I beg your pardon, said Alice. It isn't respectable to beg, said the king. I only meant that I didn't understand, said Alice. Why one to come and one to go? Don't I tell you, the king repeated impatiently. I must have 2, to fetch and to carry. One to fetch and one to carry. At this moment the messenger arrived. He was far too much out of breath to say a word. He could only wave his hands about and make the most fearful faces at the poor king. This young lady loves you with an H, said the king, introducing Alice in the hopes of turning off the messenger's attention from himself. But it was no use. The Anglo-Saxon attitudes only got more extraordinary every moment, while the great eyes rolled wildly from side to side. You alarm me, said the king. I feel faint. Give me a ham sandwich. On which the messenger, to Alice's great amusement, opened the bag that hung around his neck and handed the sandwich to the king, who devoured it greedily. Another sandwich, said the king. There's nothing but hay left now, the messenger said, peeping into the bag. Hay, then, said the king murmured in a faint whisper. Alice was glad to see that it revived him a good deal. There's nothing like eating hay when you're faint, he remarked to her, as he munched away. I should think throwing cold water over you would be better, suggested Alice, or some sal volatile. I didn't say there was nothing better, the king replied. I just said there was nothing like it, which Alice did not venture to deny. Who did you pass on the road? The king went on, holding out his hands to the messenger for some more hay. Nobody, said the messenger. Quite right, said the king. This young lady saw him too, so of course nobody walks slower than you. I do my best, the messenger said in a sullen tone. I'm sure nobody walks much faster than I do. He can't do that, said the king, or else he'd have to be here first. However, now you've gotten your breath, you may tell us what's happening in the town. I'll whisper it, said the messenger, putting his hands to his mouth in the shape of a trumpet, and stooping so that he can get close to the king's ear. Alice was sorry for this, as she wanted to hear the news too. However, instead of whispering, he simply shouted at the top of his voice, They're at it again! Do you call that a whisper? Cried the poor king, jumping up and shaking himself. If you do such a thing again, I'll have you buttered. It went through and through my head like an earthquake. It would have been a very tiny earthquake, thought Alice. Who are at it again? She ventured to ask. Why, the lion and the unicorn, of course, said the king. Fighting for the crown. Yes, to be sure, said the king. And the best of the joke is that it's my crown all the while. Let's run and see them. And they trotted off, Alice repeating to herself as she ran the words of an old song. The lion and the unicorn were fighting for the crown. The lion beat the unicorn all around the town. Some gave them white bread, some gave them brown. Some gave them plum cake and drummed them out of town. Does the one that wins get the crown? She asked as well as she could, for the run was putting her quite out of breath. Dear me, no, said the king. What an idea. Would you be good enough, Alice panted out after running a little further, to stop a minute just to get one's breath again? I'm good enough, said the king, only I'm not strong enough. You see, a minute goes by so fearfully quickly, you might as well try to stop a bandersnatch. Alice had no more breath for talking, so they trotted on in silence until they came to the sight of a great crowd in the middle of which the lion and the unicorn were fighting. They were in such a cloud of dust that at first Alice could not make out which was which, but she soon managed to distinguish the unicorn by his horn. They placed themselves close to where Hadda and the other messenger was standing and watching the fight, with a cup of tea in one hand and a piece of bread and butter on the other. He's only just out of prison, and he hadn't finished his tea when he was sent in. Hagar said to Alice, and they only give them oyster shells in there, so you see he's very hungry and thirsty. How are you, dear child? He went on, putting his arm affectionately around Hadda's neck. Hadda looked around and nodded, and went on with his bread and butter. Were you happy in prison, dear child? Said Hagar. Hadda looked around once more, and this time a tear or two trickled down his cheek, but not a word would he say. Speak, can't you? Hagar cried impatiently, but Hadda only munched away and drank some more tea. Speak, won't you? Cried the king. How are they getting on with the fight? Hadda made a desperate effort and swallowed a large piece of bread and butter. They're getting on very well, he said in a choking voice. Each of them been down about 87 times. And I suppose they'll soon bring the white bread and the brown, ventured Alice to remark. It's waiting for him now, said Hadda. This is a bit of it as I'm eating. There was a pause in the fight just then, and the lion and the unicorn sat down, panting, while the king called out, 10 minutes allowed for refreshments. Higer and Hatter set to work at once, carrying around trays of white and brown bread. Alice took a piece to taste, but it was very dry. I don't think they'll fight any more today, the king said to Hatter. And go and order the drums to begin. And Hatter went bounding away like a grasshopper. For a minute or two, Alice stood silent, watching him. Suddenly she brightened up. Look, look, she cried, pointing eagerly. There's the White Queen running across the country. She came flying out of the wood over yonder. How fast those queens can run. There's some enemy after her, no doubt, the king said, without even looking round. That wood's full of them. Aren't you going to run and help her? Alice asked, very much surprised at his taking it so quietly. No use, said the king. She runs so fearfully quick. You might as well try to catch a bandersnatch. But I'll make a memorandum about her if you like. She's a dear good creature, he repeated softly to himself as he opened his memorandum book. Do you spell creature with a double E? At this moment, the unicorn sauntered by them with his hands in his pockets. I had the best of it this time, he said to the king, just glancing at him as he passed. A little, the king replied rather nervously. You shouldn't have run through him with your horn, you know. It didn't hurt him, the unicorn said carelessly, and he was going on when his eye happened to fall upon Alice. He turned around instantly and stood for some time looking at her with an air of deepest disgust. What is this? He said at last. This is a child, Hager repeated eagerly, coming in front of Alice to introduce her, spreading out both his hands towards her in an Anglo-Saxon attitude. We only found it today. It's as large as life and twice as natural. I always thought they were fabulous monsters, said the unicorn. Is it alive? It can talk, said Hager solemnly. The unicorn looked dreamily at Alice and said, Talk, child. Alice could not help her lips curling up into a smile as she began. Do you know, I always thought unicorns were fabulous monsters too. I never saw one alive before. Well, now that we have seen each other, said the unicorn, if you'll believe in me, I'll believe in you. Is that a bargain? Yes, if you like, said Alice. Come, fetch us a plum cake, old man, the unicorn went on, turning from her to the king. None of your brown bread for me. Certainly, the king muttered, and beckoned to Hager. Open the bag, he whispered. Quick, not that one. That one's full of hay. Hager took a chance. Hager took a large cake out of the bag and gave it to Alice to hold, while he got out a dish and a carving knife. How they all came out of it, Alice couldn't guess. It was just like a conjuring trick, she thought. The lion had joined them while this was going on. He looked very tired and sleepy, and his eyes were half shut. What's this? He said, blinking lazily at Alice and speaking in a deep hollow tone that sounded like the tolling of a great bell. Ah, what is it now? The unicorn cried eagerly. You'll never guess. I couldn't. The lion looked at Alice wearily. Are you animal, or vegetable, or mineral? He said, yawning at every other word. It's a fabulous monster, the unicorn cried out before Alice could reply. The hand round the plum cake, monster, the lion said, lying down and putting his chin onto his paws. Sit down, both of you, to the king and unicorn. Fair play with the cake, you know. The king was evidently very uncomfortable at having to sit down between the two great creatures. There was no other place for him. What a fight we might have for the crown now, the unicorn said, looking slowly up at the crown, which the poor king was nearly shaking off his head. He trembled so much. I should win easily, said the lion. I'm not so sure about that, said the unicorn. Why, I beat you all around town, you know. You chicken. The lion repeated angrily, half getting up as he spoke. Here the king interrupted to prevent the quarrel going on. He was very nervous, and his voice quite quivered. All around the town, he said. That's a good long way. Did you go by the old bridge or by the marketplace? You get the best view by the old bridge. I'm sure I don't know, the lion growled out as he lay down again. There was too much dust to see anything. What a time the monster is, cutting up that cake. Alice had seated herself on the bank of a little brook and with the great dish on her knees, and was sawing away diligently with the knife. "It's very provoking," she said, in reply to the lion. She is getting quite used to being called the monster. "I've cut several slices already, but they always join on again." "You don't know how to manage looking-glass cakes," the unicorn remarked. "Hand it round first and cut it afterwards." This sounded nonsense, but Alice very obediently got up and carried the dish around, and the cake divided itself into 3 pieces as she did so. "Now cut it up," said the lion, as she returned to her place with the empty dish. "I say, this isn't fair," cried the unicorn as Alice sat with the knife in her hand, very much puzzled how to begin. "The monster has given the lion twice as much as me." "She's kept none for herself anyhow," said the lion. "Do you like plum cake, monster?" But before Alice could answer him, the drums began. Where the noise came from she couldn't make out. The air seemed full of it, and rang through her head until she felt quite deafened. She started to her feet and sprang across the little brook in her terror, and had just the time to see the lion and unicorn rise to their feet with angry looks at being interrupted in their feast, before she dropped to her knees and put her hands over her ears, vainly trying to shut out the dreadful uproar. "If that doesn't drum them out of town," she thought to herself, "nothing ever will." Chapter 8. It's My Own Invention. After a while, the noise seemed gradually to die away, until all was dead silence, and Alice lifted up her head in some alarm. There was no one to be seen, and her first thought was that she must have dreamt about the lion and a unicorn, those queer Anglo-Saxon messengers. However, there was a great dish still lying at her feet, on which she had tried to cut the plum cake. "So I wasn't dreaming after all," she said to herself. Unless we're all part of the same dream. Well, I do hope it's my dream and not the Red King's. I don't like belonging to another person's dream," she went on in a rather complaining tone. "I have a great mind to go and wake him and see what happens." At this moment her thoughts were interrupted by a loud shouting of "Ahoy! Ahoy! Check!" and a knight dressed in crimson armor came galloping down upon her, brandishing a great club. Just as he reached her, the horse stopped suddenly. "You are my prisoner," the knight cried, as he tumbled off his horse. Startled as she was, Alice was more frightened for him than for herself at that moment, and watched him with some anxiety as he mounted again. As soon as he was comfortably in the saddle, he began once more. "Oh, excuse me. Still a little tired. I'm still a little eepy. If I could make a sequel to Alice in Wonderland, I'd call it Alice in Ponderland." Good one, Wasabi. As soon as he was comfortably in the saddle, he began once more. "You're my—" But here another voice broke in. "Ahoy! Ahoy! Check!" And Alice looked around in some surprise for the new enemy. This time it was a white knight. He drew up at Alice's side and tumbled off his horse just as the red knight had done. Then he got on again, and the two knights sat and looked at each other for some time without speaking. Alice looked from one side to the other in some bewilderment. "She's my prisoner, you know," the red knight said at last. "Yes, but then I came to rescue her," said the white knight. The white knight replied. "Well, we must fight for her then," said the red knight, as he took up his helmet, which hung from the saddle, and was something in the shape of a horse's head, and put it on. "You will observe the rules of battle, of course," the white knight remarked, putting on his helmet too. "I always do," said the red knight, and they began banging away at each other with such fury that Alice got behind a tree to be out of the way of the blows. "I wonder now what the rules of battle are," she said to herself as she watched the fight timidly, peeping out from her hiding place. "One rule seems to be that if one knight hits the other, he knocks him off his horse, and if he misses, he tumbles off himself. And another rule seems to be that if they hold the clubs with their arms, as if they were Punch and Judy, what a noise they would make when they tumble. Just like a whole set of fire irons falling into the fender. And how quiet the horses are. They just let them get on and off just as they were tables. Another rule of battle that Alice had not noticed seemed to be that they always fell on their heads, and the battle ended with both falling off this way, side by side. When they got up again, they shook hands, and the red knight mounted and galloped off. "It was a glorious victory, wasn't it?" said the white knight as he came up panting. "I don't know," said Alice doubtfully. "I don't want to be anybody's prisoner. I want to be a queen." So you will when you've crossed the next brook, said the White Knight. I'll see you to the safe end of the wood, and then I must go back, you know. That's the end of my move. Thank you very much, said Alice. May I help you off with your helmet? With evidently more than he could manage by himself. However, she managed to shake him out of it at last. Now one can breathe more easily, said the knight, putting back his shaggy hair with both hands, and turning his gentle and large mild eyes to Alice. She thought he had never seen such a strange-looking soldier in all her life. He was dressed in tin armor, which seemed to fit him very badly, and he had a queer-shaped little deal box fastened across his shoulders, upside down, and with the lid hanging open. Alice looked at it with great curiosity. I see you're admiring my little box, said the knight in a friendly tone. It's my own invention, to keep clothes and sandwiches in. You see, I carry it upside down so the rain can't get in. But the things can get out, said Alice gently remarked. Do you know that the lid's open? I didn't know, said the knight, and a shade of vexation passed over his face. Then all the things must have fallen out, and the box is no use without them. He unfastened it as he spoke, and was just going to throw it into the bushes, when a sudden thought seemed to strike him, and he hung it carefully on the tree. Can you guess why I did that? He said to Alice. Alice shook her head. It helps some bees may make a nest in it. Then I should get some honey. But you've got a beehive or something like one fastened to the saddle, said Alice. Yes, it's a very good beehive, the knight said in a discontented tone. One of the best kinds, but not a single bee has come near it yet. And the other thing is a mouse trap. I suppose the mice keep the bees out, or the bees keep the mice out. I don't know which. I was wondering what the mouse trap was for, said Alice. Isn't it very likely there will be any mice on the horse's back? Not very likely, perhaps, said the knight. But if they do come, I don't choose to have them running about. You see, he went on after a pause, it's as well to be provided for everything. That's the reason the horse has all those anklets around his feet. But what are they for? Alice asked in a tone of great curiosity. To guard against the bites of sharks, the knight replied. It's an invention of my own. And now help me on. I'll go with you to the end of the wood. What's that dish for? It's meant for plum cake, said Alice. Well, better take it with us, the knight said. It'll come in handy if we find any plum cake. Help me get it into this bag. This took a long time to manage, though Alice had held the bag open very carefully, because the knight was so very awkward in putting in the dish. The first 2 or 3 times that he tried, he fell it himself instead. It's a rather tight fit, you see, he said, as they got it in at last. There are so many candlesticks in the bag, and he hung it to the saddle, which was already loaded with bunches of carrots and fire irons and many other things. I hope you got your hair well fastened on, he continued as they set off. Only in the usual way, said Alice, smiling. That's hardly enough, he said, anxiously. You see, the wind is so very strong here. It's as strong as soup. Have you invented a plan for keeping the hair from being blown off? Alice inquired. Not yet, said the knight, but I've got a plan for keeping it from falling off. I should like to hear it very much. First, you take an upright stick, said the knight, and then you make your hair creep up it like a fruit tree. Now, the reason your hair falls off is because it hangs down. Things never fall upwards, you know. It's like a plan of my own invention. You may try it if you like. It didn't sound a very comfortable plan, Alice thought, and for a few minutes she walked on in silence, puzzling over the idea, and every now and then stopping to help the poor knight, who certainly was not a good writer. Whenever the horse stopped, which it did very often, he fell off in front of it. And whenever it went on again, which it generally did rather suddenly, he fell off behind it. Otherwise, he kept on pretty well, except that he had a habit of now and then falling off sideways. And as he generally did this on the side on which Alice was walking, she soon found that it was the best plan not to walk quite close to the horse. I'm afraid you've not had much practice in riding, she ventured to say, as she was helping him up for the 5th tumble. The knight looked very much surprised, and a little offended at the remark. What makes you say that? He asked as he scrambled back into the saddle, keeping hold of Alice's hair with one hand, to save himself from falling over on the other side. because people don't fall off quite so often when they've had much practice. I've had plenty of practice, the knight said gravely. Plenty of practice. Alice could think of nothing better to say than indeed, that as she said it, as heartily as she could. They went on a little ways in silence after this, the knight with his eyes shut, muttering to himself, and Alice watching anxiously for the next tumble. The great art of writing, the knight suddenly began in a loud voice, waving his right arm as he spoke, is to keep. Here the sentence ended as suddenly as it began, as the knight fell heavily on the top of his head exactly in the path where Alice was walking. She was quite frightened this time, and said in an anxious tone, as she picked him up, I hope no bones are broken. None to speak of, the knight said, as if he didn't mind breaking 2 or 3 of them. The great art of writing, as I was saying, is to keep your balance properly. Like this, you know. He let go of the bridle and stretched out both arms to show Alice what he meant, and this time he fell flat on his back right under the horse's feet. Plenty of practice, he went on repeating, all the time that Alice was getting him on his feet again. Plenty of practice. It's too ridiculous, Alice cried, losing all her patience this time. You ought to have a wooden horse on wheels. That you ought. Does that kind go smoothly? The king asked in a tone of great interest, clasping his arms around the horse's neck as he spoke, just in time to save himself from tumbling off again. Much more smoothly than a live horse, said Alice, with a little scream of laughter, in spite of all she could do to prevent it. I'll get one, the knight said thoughtfully to himself. Or 2, 1 or 2, several. Hold on. Ugh. Okay. I may have to stop here. My stomach is doing a weird little turn, and I did not like it at all. So I'm gonna leave it off here, just to kind of see where my stomach decides it wants to do. I haven't fully recovered. I'm better now, but I haven't fully recovered, so I'm gonna leave it off here for right now. But I'll definitely pick it up again next week. Excuse me, I'm sorry. My stomach turned pretty badly. So I'm gonna go and see if I can try to take some rest, because, yeah, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna call it here. Sorry guys, I'm gonna call it here because my stomach is still not 100%, and my stomach just did an awful turn. So, so thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Sorry I'm ending it kind of quickly but I'd rather not be sick on stream. I'd rather not be sick on stream, so I'm gonna end it here. I love you guys so very much. And remember, hug your friends, tell someone you love them, and be a force for good in the world, because goodness knows the world needs more goodness. I'm gonna go rest up and see what my stomach wants to do. And I'll see you guys, Thursday. If not tomorrow, I don't know. Depending on how I feel, maybe tomorrow I'll come back with a little chat, a little casual chat, just to kind of catch up with everyone, since I didn't do it yesterday. If not, then I'll see you guys on Thursday for more one shot. Alright, you guys, I love you all so very much, and I'll see you next time. I'll be seeing you guys. Bye!